Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Mat Chat. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. I am joined today by the new assistant coach at the University of Michigan. That title does not do him justice for all the things that he's done in the sport of wrestling and for the sport of wrestling, and also a big brother to me, really, during my freshman year at college. Kevin Jackson. KJ, welcome back.
David, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. And I'm glad to be on your show.
It's always fun, man. I want to say this before we start. I got a chance to be in the corner with you a couple years ago with Josh Saunders when Josh had a great run and actually placed in the Senior Open as a high school wrestler. And he had spent a lot of time training with you that year almost exclusively. And I pretty much just made sure that his water bottle didn't run away. I didn't do anything else. Make sure that your towel didn't fall off your shoulder. But I just want to tell you, that was a bucket list for me. I learned a lot just listening to you. Some of it were specific tactics and strategies, but a lot of it was how you delivered things, your positivity, urgency when it needed to be, calmness when it needed to be. And I haven't said this to you, but I think you made me a better coach that weekend. So I want to thank you.
Well, David, I think you're selling yourself short. I think, I think we that are in the wrestling world know how many kids you have affected and know how you affected people in the wrestling world, not only on the mat, but off the mat, and continue to do so. And so don't sell yourself short, but I always have a great time in the corner with other coaches for the most part. There's a lot of guys that I've had the opportunity to be in the corner with. And, I think afterwards, we look at each other and say that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? And
that's exactly what I said to you. That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
And I don't know too many corners, over the last few years that I have been in with other coaches that really hadn't been a lot of fun. And that's just the process as opposed to the wins and losses, right?
Yeah. And, I had talked to Josh ahead of time and asked if it was okay to be the second corner. And I talked to you about it, but it was fun. I'm actually going to be taking an RTC job here soon in St. Louis and St. Charles, and certainly not like to the level of stuff you're doing, but like you said, still trying to have a positive impact on kids. And I think one of my favorite parts of having this podcast is getting to pick the brains of guys like yourself, not only on the air for I tell people hopefully my podcast is just me and my friend watching the game or the UFC and just talking about wrestling in the background and get to ask the cool questions that everybody wished they could ask. But I've learned a lot doing these podcasts over the last 4 or 5 years from some of the greatest minds in sports. But I can just tell you this, I remember when I was at Iowa State and it was a rough year for me. And when you would leave the dorm room or when you would leave the practice room, I was always in a better mood than when I was before. So I don't think I've ever talked about that publicly, but I really appreciate it, man, because you didn't have to be nice to me then, and you were.
Well, being a roommate of my brother, I'm trying to lift him up probably the same way, and so I think you got a little bit of that going for you. But obviously we're family. I mean, you were my brother's roommate when you guys were freshmen at Iowa State, and so our history is long. My relationship with you and your parents is a long history as well, and so obviously, you can probably ask me questions that some can't, right?
Yeah, it's a blessing for sure. And I know it was a rising tide lifts all ships where I benefited from being, with Tori for sure. But anyway, so let's get to this. There was a big move announced. You are now the new assistant coach at the University of Michigan. I've been lucky enough to have Sean on the podcast, Sergey on the podcast, Kellen when he was there on the podcast. And there's so many angles to this, but let's just start out at the beginning because we are on USA Wrestling. You were the developmental guy at USA Wrestling for years. The accolades, the number of medals, the whole process that you guys have put kids through. We actually talked to you a while back about a couple of young men getting into the EAP program. So I got to understand it even more as from sort of an advisory point of view, but the data is unbelievable. Let's just clear the air because some people put some misinformation out there. You and USA Wrestling are on good terms and you're leaving voluntarily. And while they're sad to see you go, they wish you well. Is that all correct?
Oh, for sure. Obviously, I enjoyed what I did at USA Wrestling. Sean offered me an opportunity and I've known Sean for years. We had a chance to work together with the cadet team a few years ago, and he always talked about if an opportunity presented itself, would I consider? And being the guy he is and knowing the kind of man he is and what kind of program he runs, I definitely said I would consider it. Not to mention my parents are 80 years old. They live in Lansing, which is an hour from Ann Arbor, and in Michigan is my home state. So so that opportunity just presented itself, and my relationship with USA Wrestling is strong. And we are USA Wrestling when you really think about it. When you've gone through the grassroots programs and gone on to the senior programs, and then coached different teams at every single level. And so I'm always going to be a part of USA Wrestling and serving in a role, whether it's a coach or team leader or tours and those type of things. And so I look forward to me and Bill's and Joe's and our senior level athletes, as well as our age group athletes, continued relationship. And so, yeah, if anything else came out besides that, it definitely was misinformation.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know that. And I mean, you're a stand-up guy. I know, like, if there was something negative, I know you would just say that I can't do the interview, or yeah, we can talk about it, one of the two. So right, I'm glad we're able to just get that out there. So let's start with where you were, and then we'll go to where you're going. So during your time at USA Wrestling, you are obviously one of the great minds in wrestling, but you got to be surrounded by a lot of other great minds, like you said, the Shawns, the John Reeders, the Lee Pritzes, the guys that do that stuff. And then all the day-to-day guys like the Joe Russells, the Cody Bickleys, all those guys, and, Mike Clayton, all. I don't want to leave anybody out, but just as an example. My next question is going to be, what do you think you taught them? But what did you learn maybe during your time at USA Wrestling that made you a better coach, a better mentor, a better anything?
Well, I just think time and just experience allows you to get better, just as far as knowing how to communicate, knowing how to approach different athletes, knowing how to be a great assistant coach, knowing how to be a leader when it's time for you to be a head coach, and just going through the process of continuing to try to be a better man, to try to be a better husband, to try to be a better father, and try to be a better coach. All of those things. As you strive to do, and most important, try to be a better Christian. So as you strive for those things, I think you continue to get better and better at your craft. And obviously, I know more now than I knew last year, and I know more now than I knew 20 years ago. And so every single coach that I've been around, and you really would have to, really think hard on the last, 20, 30 years. And there's not too many of them I haven't been around, whether it's coaching them or coaching with them or doing both. Right now, I'm having the athletes that I've trained, like a John Reeder that's now sitting in the corners with me at cadets and junior world championships. And so those relationships are long standing. I know me and Humphreys coached, at a couple of world championships, and I knew Hump when he was a baby, right? That Team Foxcatcher when he was out there. And so if you just look at the history of wrestling and you kind of follow it as close as you follow it, you know that there's not too many athletes or coaches that have came across the scene over the last 20, 30 years that I haven't had a relationship with, and probably had some pretty good times and laughed a lot with, and seen some really good wrestling. Yeah,
I would. It was probably 10, 11 years ago, and I don't know how, but I ended up at a table with John Smith, Tadaka Hata, Zeke Jones, and a couple other guys. And I don't even remember how I ended up there. And I didn't say a word except just I bought the cocktails for a couple hours. And, and people say, like, you get a chance to be a fly on the wall. Like, it's kind of like, I think, like watching football. Like we all like, people that like football, but like when you're watching it with Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are explaining everything, you're like, I actually know nothing about football, like I think I do. I have a fantasy football team, whatever. But listening, there's those guys, you guys are at that level. You're 4, 5, 6 steps ahead. And for you guys, that's normal. Like I tell all the guys you guys are all very gracious with your time. No one's ever said no to me. But you guys think at a different level. And probably don't think at that level about everything in life. Like maybe you don't know how to change a tire or something. But at this that you're really good at, you think at an elite level. And I just encourage people in any part of coaching, whatever, try to hang out with people that are elite. It opens your mind up so much. You and me are in a couple committees, groups together, and we do some conference calls together, and those are other ones where I might be able to contribute more on the business side, that kind of stuff. But I would just imagine, I was thinking about it as you were saying what you're saying, you're in these corners and like so-and-so, let's say I'm competing, right? And my personal coach is Lee Pritz. So you're the second coach and you guys are there together, but maybe how Pritz communicates with me, you're like, I'm going to steal that. You know, like I like how he said that, or I like how he presented that, or I like how he motivated him, or how he calmed him or her down, you know, all these different things.
Sure.
I just feel like there must be like an encyclopedia of just smart stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a lot like wrestling, right? There's a base level of skills that all great wrestlers have, and that all great wrestling coaches preach, and that we talk about must-win positions that we have to ingrain into our athletes for them to have success. But there's little twists, right? I might show something a little different than what you show it, than John Smith showed it, then, you know, and so it's almost like, and I heard this early on in my career, it's almost like you steal, right? You're stealing wrestling technique. You know, I think a high crotch has always been a high crotch from the beginning of time, but you might put a little twist in your crackdown that I might not put on mine. And so it's always just learning those little things, but also from a communication standpoint. You know, you know, Lee Pritz is one of my favorite guys. You know, Lee Pritz I've taken to, you know, several cadet world champions, or really he's come to several cadet world championships and juniors as well. And just his positive energy and how he can relate to the athlete, right? How we can communicate to the student athlete, I think is really, really strong. And I think we have that in Michigan as well. I think with Josh Urella and Sean Bourmet and Coach Dave, I think all of them bring that same type of positive energy to a program. And so it's not just some of the guys that I sat in the corners of, but you know, you can learn from anybody anywhere. And we've had several conversations, whether it's tactical, technical, or spiritual or cultural. We've had several conversations where I've picked up things as well. And so I think, again, it's always evolving, it's always learning, it's always taking from the best practices and trying to put those into your practice. Because at the end of the day, this isn't rocket science, it's wrestling. And if you know what it takes and what it means to do the things that most athletes want to do, then it's a clear picture. And it's like you said, me and Kenny Monday have several conversations, and some people just wouldn't feel comfortable in our conversations when we're talking wrestling, just because, you know, we're really, you know, talking about it at a level that some people can't grasp.
Yeah.
But a lot of coaches that I've worked with are on that track to capture it all and have captured it. And so I think you're right. We continue to learn, we continue to steal, we continue to take from each and every one of the athletes and coaches we've been around. I've learned a ton from senior level athletes as well. And so just to continue to put those into your practices, your daily practices, allows you to get to where you want to get to. And it's allowed me to become the coach that I feel like I am today. Yeah.
It's really well said. You were one of the guests on I feel like the most important podcast I ever did, which was on racial equality. And obviously things aren't solved now, but it was sort of at a peak then of a peak problem. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but it was when we chose to do the podcast, is probably a fair way to say it. And I remember like we were in COVID and you had a beard and you were not happy. And I'm so used to being, I was like, I knew this was a serious topic, but I was like, you know, I literally called my mom and I said, I don't know if I did something good or bad today, but I know I did something today. I said, you know, like, and I know my heart was in the right place, you know? So, I mean, you're, like you said, spiritual, all these other things. So it's fascinating. So
your work with the BWA and your work with, you know, other groups that we're part of, and for you to have the intelligence and have the really the guts to put on a show during that time with several people that you thought could share, I thought was really important. And I think it continues to be important. I think it continues to be a subject of conversation. And I think that's all it really is when it comes down to, when two men, two women can't have a straight conversation about everything and choose to disagree at some point, then we really are lost. But obviously, I think you've tried to do that and put that conversation out there and get the input, not only from yourself, but from people that aren't exactly like you. And I think that says a lot about you. And I think that's pretty strong when you talk about the lack of real conversation that does happen between people that disagree.
Yeah, Jahi and I were actually talking about that last night. I congratulated him, you know, on the Morgan State thing, which we'll get to. And when we were putting the gala together, obviously I'm literally probably old enough to be his dad, which is depressing, but, it's more like a little brother relationship. And I just, we just talked about how we can talk freely and we don't see the world the same way. We haven't had the same life experience, but we listen to the other person, we respect the other person. And that's where you try to start, right? Is you try to find common ground, respect the person, maybe disagree with their opinion, but don't be disrespectful about it. And I appreciate it. I've been blessed to have some voice in the sport, and I feel like you have to use it, right? Like you have to. If you don't use it, you're either going to do something, or by doing nothing, you're saying something else. So anyway, yeah. So when you look now going forward, so obviously you're the coach at Iowa State, head coach, had some studs there, a bunch of hammers, and now you're walking into a room which I think has the most interesting RTC in the country. I'm not going to say, Nittany Lion and Cornell have some great ones, but interesting in terms of the coaching staff and the Olympians being from different countries, and there's medals and #1 seeds and all this different thing. And I know you're on the collegiate staff. You're not on the RTC staff per se, but I know there's a ton of overlap, and like you're going to work with Stevan and you're going to work with Amin. I know that they're probably begging you to work out with them after regular practice, folk style practice. I've got to imagine, like you said, you've talked to everybody important in the last 30, 40 years. I'm sure you and Sergey are friendly, if not friends. And I knew you were from Lansing because Tori, but what was so exciting about this for you that you would leave something that you had really built? Because it's the golden age of USA Wrestling. Like, America's doing epic things. We were just talked about it on our pod, like how many men and women have multiple medals and stuff. And anyway, we'll get that. What was so cool about Michigan that you wanted?
Like I said, when Sean asked me about possibly working with him in the future, I always thought it would be in the RTC position. I always thought it would be in that role, right? Because, I enjoy freestyle, I enjoy touring, I enjoy taking guys to Worlds and Olympics, and have had pretty good success with athletes of all ages.
Pretty good success, yeah. Okay.
All the way up to the senior level. But Sergey's done a fantastic job, and I do have a good relationship with Sergey. It wasn't always that way, probably because we just didn't know each other, or we didn't get to know each other on a personal level like we probably could have and should have. But right now, I think our relationship is in a great spot. He's done an excellent job there, and you see what he's produced, bringing home a medalist for that program and for that university in Amin. And so him staying there and me joining that staff, the whole staff there is they're about the whole thing, everything that has to do with wrestling. That goes for the recruiting to the folk style NCAA championships to the international style. So it covers the whole gamut of what you actually need in the program, and and it's been proven, and it's shown in the results at the NCAA tournament and in the results internationally. And so they have those pieces of the puzzle, and I think I really have to give credit to Sean Bourmet. He's egoless. He doesn't have an ego at all, because some people might be intimidated with me coming into the room, or just not know how it's going to affect their program. But I've had the opportunity to work with Kirk McHenry, who's now at Michigan, and Will Lewin and Parrish and Kanan Storr, and quite a few other athletes that have came through their doors. And so those relationships had already been built. But you have to give it to a head coach that allows every single one of his coaches to have an impact, and just wants to bring out the best within his athletes. And I think that really is what lets a program thrive. And I think when you see the best programs, I think you see them allowing their staff to really do work and have that impact that's necessary for the highest goals.
Yeah, for sure. And two things came to mind. One is, if I was Sean Bourmet, I would hire you as a college coach, because college coaches are allowed to recruit, and every freaking 15, 18-year-old that's good in wrestling knows you and loves you. So I would want that. I would not want you handicapped that way at all.
No, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to miss those kids. I'm going to miss the kids that I've had an opportunity to work with the cadets. Junior kids, I've had great relationships with those guys, and I've actually had quite a few guys come out of our EAP program, like the Brookses and the Rocky Elams and Gabe Tags, you know, that have gone on and been world champions or world medalists, and just you know, having that relationship with those guys has been great. But the cadets and the U15s, you know, that youth, you know, that excitement and that confidence that these kids bring to training and to bring to competition is infectious, right? And I think that's why you see a lot of coaches want to be involved with that at that cadet level. Now, a lot of coaches want to recruit that cadet level, so we understand that. But it's just been a joy. It's been a thrill, especially after leaving Iowa State. It was refreshing to see kids just self-motivated to go out there and battle, you know, to go out there and wrestle like Americans and compete. And so I'm going to miss that group, and hopefully I get an opportunity to still have an impact with those athletes, because I do think that training ground is absolutely essential. You look at the Gabes and the Yannis and the Vitos and the Brookses and the guys that are going to be coming up the line. They've gone through that system, and that system's going to continue, and we're going to continue to have great results because of the programs that have been in place for, you know, for a long time, probably since Coach Zadok and even Doc Bennett were developmental coaches.
Well, I can't remember if it was you or Pritz or somebody else told me the story, but just real quick sidebar about those guys. Brooks was actually an alternate one year, and like somebody got hurt or something.
Hey,
and
Brooks, Aaron Brooks is one of my favorite guys, one of my favorite kids, one of my favorite athletes. And he wasn't my first EAP kid. Aaron Cashman was my first EAP kid, but he was in the program by himself, you know, and so he came in for basically a year before he went to Iowa. But Aaron Brooks locked in. It was the first one after Cashman to lock in. But Aaron came to the Cadet World Championships, and he was an alternate. He had lost to Travis Whitlake, a kid I know real well as well, yeah, at Oklahoma State, and he was our world team member. And Aaron was the alternate. And Whitlake got hurt late in the process. We called Aaron Brooks up to come to the World Championships. He got all his information in, and didn't come to training camp at all. Missed all training camp, but he came to the World Championships. But when he came to the World Championships, he brought his own USA wrestling, his own flag, his own.
That's
USA
exactly
flag.
what I wanted to get to. Yes.
So I looked at Pritch. I looked at and I think Bowman or Coach Bormet was there as well. I said, hey, if a kid brings his own flag, he's winning. And sure enough, he dominated the field and really jumped levels. I think from the loss to Whitlake, allowed him to jump some huge gaps in his wrestling, in his mindset to compete like he's currently competing now. And so that's one of my favorite stories to tell. A guy that brings his own flag, you can count on him winning.
That's where I wanted to go with the story, because I remember now it's Pritz, because Pritz goes, hey, Meerkat, my man brought his own flag. He goes, we were like, it's a wrap.
He went so hard. He wrestled so hard, and you know, he was fun to watch, fun to coach. And then, you know, that's the year he came into our program, and then he went on and got a medal at the Junior Worlds. And I had almost a year and a half. I think Aaron might have been an athlete I spent the most time, was the most EAP time with Aaron Brooks. And so that was a good time.
Yeah. I wanted people to hear that story, because that's like one of those stories you hear as being sort of semi in the inner circle. You're like, man, that's not my story to tell, but man, that's a cool story, you know?
That's one of the best stories of all time. That's one of the best, because we didn't know. I watched this video against Travis Whitlake, and I talked to him. I'm like, hey, what do you think how do you think that match went? He's like, oh, it was close, coach. And I watched both matches, and I'm like, it wasn't that close. So I really didn't know what to expect. But when he got to the World Championships and wrestled his first match, he went so hard. He broke the kid in about 45 seconds, got the kid exhausted, and he came off the mat. And I said, man, you went hard, dude. You keep wrestling like that, you're gonna break all these guys. He said, coach, I can go harder. I'm like, well, go harder then.
Air it out, man. Don't leave, empty out the chamber.
Yeah, he let it go, man. He let it go.
So you're now back in Division I, so you're back in recruiting and compliance and 9.9 and NIL and all this other stuff. I'm sure some of it's fun, and then some of it's like, what I gleaned from what you said about the cadets and the U15s, and I should not say you said this. This is my interpretation of it, and correct me, but like, there's a certain purity about those kids that it's just pure love of the sport. They're not worried about their Twitter or their IG. They're just
Oh, they're
wrestling.
worried about Twitter and IG. Don't get it twisted. They're
Okay.
on IG and Twitter. Let's be real, right?
But they just love wrestling. And it's not necessarily about scholarships and this other stuff. And it feels like the older you get, more that wrestling becomes a business. So
Well, you have to, and I think there's a few coaches probably out there doing a really good job at it. But pressure is real when you allow it to affect the way you compete. And it's hard to wrestle dual meets at the highest level. It's hard to wrestle, and in the NCAA tournament with the intensity of that. If you're not locked in and thinking along the right lines, if you're not clear on what it really is all about, and that's just doing what you've done your whole life, basically, and the passion and the love and the gratefulness that you have in your heart, and which allows you to do it. And so it could be real tough if you don't wrestle with those things in your heart and in your mind. And so yeah, I think, that's something that I probably learned over the years. Probably didn't have that at Iowa State right off the bat. I came from a senior level. I came from the senior level as a national coach and dropped down to the college ranks. And once I got athletes at the senior level, they were locked in as far as being mentally tough, competing hard, competing with their heart, competing with their soul. And it was just a matter of trying to get them technically better. And so really probably me being flawed in that area, not really grasping what really actually made some young man think and not be nervous or feel more pressure, is something I probably had to gain and learn through the process. And that's some other things that probably helped me while I was at USA Wrestling.
yeah, I mean, like you hear all these things like just, cut it loose, be free. But when you think about like, hey, this is like, hey, this is my one chance, right? Like if I made the Olympic trial, like this is my one chance. Or even like for me, like the junior college finals, like whatever it is, the state tournament, whatever your thing is. And there's all this mindset stuff, and it sounds good on paper. Just go have fun, score first, score last. I mean, like I think we all know sort of the 10 commandments of wrestling, but being able to execute under stress, like I do jujitsu, and almost everybody I do I go against is better than me at real jujitsu. But a lot of those guys don't know how to compete in a tournament. It's like they'll beat me in practice, and then we go to a tournament, we keep score, and they turn a light on, and like I might only know 4 things, but I do those 4 things against everybody, Yeah. And it's like that ability to get obviously the highest level people in business, in sports, in entertainment, they can execute like the brightest light. They execute flawlessly. And that feels like that's the $64 million solution. Like if you could bottle that, nobody would work a day in their life, right?
Right. Well, you see it all the time. I mean, you even see it in the MMA world when you watch a Daniel Cormier, you watch a Henry Cejudo, and since they competed at the highest level of the Olympics, and you've seen our guys compete at the NCAA level, those guys, when they get into the fight game, you can actually visually see them take it up a notch, and that other guy not being able to match that, and having the ability to turn it up to that next level is something that it's going to take to be an NCAA champion, to be a world champion, to be Olympic champion, to be Olympian, and to understand what that feels like, what it looks like, and what it actually is something that the top coaches can teach. And I know a lot of people talk to me about freestyle's your niche, or things of that nature. And I almost take that as an insult to a certain extent, because coaching is coaching, and communication is communication. And I think the thing that I've learned, and that me and Kenny Monday talk about the most, is that mindset and that clear understanding of what it actually looks like, feels like, and actually is, that you have to do in order to have success at any level. And that first comes down to how are you going to compete? Are you going to compete with your heart, and you're going to compete with your soul? And once that's determined that you're going to go out there and go to war, we can add the tactical and technical sides to it. But the first piece of it is going to war. And that's why I'm really excited about the Michigan program, because I've watched them from afar, just because I'm from Michigan, and I've known Sean, and obviously a lot of those athletes that I've worked with are there. They have those pieces already in place. So those guys are going to war. And I think, for Michigan and their program, it was just a matter of adding another piece of the puzzle that they feel can help them reach their ultimate goal and to sustain that. And so yeah. I know I started rambling a little bit, and
No,
I
that's why
apologize.
we have you guys on. So you tell us the stuff we don't know. You're absolutely right that it is insulting to say like, this is your niche, right? Like you said, coaching is coaching, teaching is teaching, mentoring is mentoring. Maybe there's certain skill sets that you probably know better than almost everybody else in the world. And maybe you're going to have to go back and work a little bit on your brick strategy and freestyle or folk style rather than freestyle, like those kind of things, right? Reacclimate yourself with the out of bounds rules, which are obviously polar opposite of freestyle. But that's like, if that's the worst problem you have with a new coach and he does all these other things right, then you're on the right track.
Well,
So
if you really think about it, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn to a certain extent, but if you look at the number of national champions that we've coached that when I was at Iowa State that we had, or the number of finalists and All-Americans, and you want to match that up against, probably not the top 5 teams that are in the country, but you match them up with pretty much every other team. I think those stats would stand up pretty strong.
they do. Yeah. I mean, I did some research ahead of time. So yeah, I mean, and you have credibility at all those levels, right? So, and you're a guy that's, you can tell is still always learning, like not like, okay, I got it figured out now, and, like watching what our team did. And it's weird because of this condensed year where the Olympics for the 2020 championship, even though it was this year, and then the 21 Worlds, and how many medals freestyle, both men's and women's, accumulated, won, however you want to say it, combined. Like it was insane. Like I think USA Wrestling spent paid out $900,000 in that Living the Dream Fund on the Olympics alone.
No, I got to give it up. I mean, I'm part of that 90s group, and we really feel like we had the best teams, the best wrestlers during that era. We had multiple Olympic champions and multiple world champions and medalists all over the place. But when you really look at, I mean, and we do have the 2-team titles. So this group has to catch that team title. But when you really look at the number of individuals that are multiple medalists at the senior level, it's ridiculous when you think about Jaden Cox with 5 medals and Kyle Snyder with 7 medals and Jordan Burroughs with 9 medals and David Taylor with 3 medals and Dake with 4 and you got Gilman with 3, gold, silver, bronze and I mean, and then you look at the junior world champions that are now starting to make our world teams and Fix coming after him being the junior world champion and now he's a silver medalist in the world. I mean, you got to give it up to the credentials that these guys have gotten over the last 8 years. Coach Zadek has done a great job, and Coach Russell as well. Just helping these guys accomplish their goals. And then when they have these coaches that are really dedicated at these RTCs, you're really having some special performances. But I do think, when you look at the credentials of all these guys, I got to kind of give it up. They're really surpassing us as far as the number of medals each and every individual has up and down this lineup. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And then when you look at our age group teams, I think since I've been here, we've averaged, I think 55% medal rate out of those cadet and junior teams. And I think 40% have been gold medalists. And so we are at the heyday of wrestling. And so you look at that and ask, why would you walk away from that? And I just think it's a great opportunity to get home around my family, to be with a great coaching staff and be with a leader like Sean Bourmet that is looking to do some special things within the program. And I'm always looking for a challenge, right? I'm always looking for new challenges. And obviously, there's only so high you can go on the payroll, at USA Wrestling before you have to, try to do the best thing for you and your family. And so those are the reasons in a nutshell in which things rolled out to Michigan, but very, very excited to have the opportunity to work with the young men that I'm going to have an opportunity to work with and the staff that I'm going to have an opportunity to work with. So,
and Michigan's established themselves as a top 10 program. And I know they team trophied the last year. Joe McFarland was there and, they've either team trophied or been knocking on the door, top 5, 6, 7, 4, in that range. And they got a lot of guys coming back. The other thing that I know you will probably get pigeonholed on, which is also insulting. I think it's insulting to all coaches, is like, oh, well, KJ wrestled at this weight, so he'll be a really good upper weight coach. Like again, wrestling's wrestling, so I know you're going to work, with Ragus and all the way up to Paris, but they do have a ton of hammers up there up top with like Paris and Brucky and Amin. And, like those last three weights are dang near as good as anybody in the country. And I would imagine, I always tell people, like, if you have really good kids, a coach is like salt and pepper. It's already a good meal. You just, like you said, you put a little spin on it, just try and make it a little tastier,
They know how to, like I say all the time. I used to say it about Jay. He knew how to wrestle before he got to Colorado Springs, And these guys know how to wrestle. They know how to compete, and they've won. I mean, they've had great success already, and so yeah, it's exciting to be around kids that think like that and believe like that, and already have had pretty strong success, right?
Yeah, but there's also something, no matter how good you are, that somebody with Kevin Jackson's credentials go, hey, I believe in you, stud. Like there's something to that.
Well, I know it's not just me, but I've been around a lot of world Olympic champions, NCAA champions, and every one of that I've been around have been coachable. They've been open-eared, they've been wide-eyed, and obviously if something doesn't fit into their arsenal, then they disregard it, but they keep it moving, but their ears are always open. And I haven't come across a world team member since whether I was national coach or assistant coach to Coach Zadig, that were not eager to learn or willing to learn or open-eared to at least hear or see, a different perspective if it wasn't their own. So, and I know Michigan has those guys in their room, as does, some other programs that are very, very successful. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, we talked on our other podcast, like how crazy this season's going to be, because normally theoretically 25% of guys graduate, and because of the free year, like it's just loaded. There's guys that were all Americans last year that are ranked 11th in the preseason. Usually if you took 8th, you're ranked 4th or 5th, and you don't go down, you go up. So there's one other thing I do want to discuss because of your position and obviously your ethnicity, and that is the Morgan State announcement of establishing wrestling at a HBCU. For people that don't know, that stands for Historically Black College or University. I said on our podcast yesterday that I'm so old, I remember like in 1980, 82, there was a guy from Morgan State that was in the national finals. He had that headgear, like with the shield on the front. I think he lost to Ricky Stewart in the finals, if I remember correctly, like 150 or 158 pounds. I'm certainly dating myself, but we've obviously been on some of the same phone calls on this, but maybe just put in words what it means to you that this has happened.
Well, I'm extremely excited for Morgan State's wrestling program. Not, HBC for sure. To have wrestling at HBC schools allows wrestling to grow, right, and allows more opportunity for a bunch of different people. Maybe a little bit, more diverse group might have an opportunity to take advantage of what these HBCs have to offer too. But I'm extremely excited. I'm from back in the day when Morgan State was a strong program, where they always said you better be ready for the Morgan State kid because he definitely could wrestle, and you better not take him lightly. And Coach Phil with the leopard skin jacket, when he was a coach there, and my brother Wayne actually finished his career at Morgan State, so wrestled for Morgan State, and so I know Morgan State very, very well. My brother still lives in Baltimore, Maryland. So he stayed there when he graduated Morgan State. And so I know the area very well. I know the coaches. I know the former coaches, and I know many of their alumni. So to see a program come back at the Division I level, first and foremost is great, right? And it doesn't happen too much. And then you put it at an HBC school that had its program dropped for, I think, maybe 25 years. It has not been a wrestling program. I'm just excited that wrestling has come back to Morgan State, and that the administration is so open to having a wrestling program. And I'm hoping that continues as far as just the excitement that surrounds it, because I don't think you bring back a program to just say you have a wrestling program. I think you bring it back for some reasons. First of all, to develop young men and women in the sport of wrestling, to give more opportunities of education, but also to perform at an elite level. And I think they have the things in place that's going to allow the coaching staff and the athletes in that program to perform at elite level, it's going to take some time.
Sure.
It's going to take some time because whoever comes in there as a coach isn't bringing any recruits with them, and so I don't think true freshmen are going to jump into the fight and be able to have great results right away. But it's going to take some time, and I think with patience and the right resources like they currently have, they can do some special things. But I'm extremely excited just because I know the history of Morgan State. My brother went there, and I remember them when they were competing at a very high level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's bigger than whether or not they have a national champion the first year, the first 5 years. Like at this year nationals, I mean, it obviously was very sparsely attended because of COVID regulations. But like when Little Rock just had a kid there, it's a new program, and there's the first national qualifier, there's a standing ovation. And we talked about yesterday in the podcast the standing ovation that will come when Morgan State has their first guy step out on the mat at the NCAA nationals. And you obviously have lived in a world where winning is pretty freaking important. You're doing it at the highest level. You talked about your percentage of medals, your percentage of gold medals, your history as a collegiate coach, and the percentage of medals and All-Americans there. But sometimes things transcend that, and just this program existing is big on a lot of levels. It's like somebody said to me yesterday, well, it's great just on the whole, a D1 program is being added, period, right? Because so many programs were lost, taken, cut, whatever the right verb you want to use is. But then for it to be in an HBCU, secondly, and then third of all, because me, I love the business side of stuff. The way this has been funded or endowed is 100% differently than how it was done at, say, Fresno, which they just threw a bunch of money at it, but it wasn't sustainable. And then they gave that coaching staff like really an ungodly, unrealistic goal on fundraising. Like they literally couldn't coach. They'd have to fundraise the whole time. This has been done differently. And that program is going to be sustainable. And whether or not they ever win nationals, whether they ever have an individual national champion, to me, as a minority, not an African-American, but a minority, is like, man, there's levels to this and how important this is. And this is of the highest magnitude. Just it's awesome to see that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree 100% everything that you said. For it to come back at an HBC school and for it to be Division I and for it to be supported the way it's been supported, I know there's a lot of smart people really working on this. I know first and foremost Morgan State's administration, their president, their athletic director, that was so open to starting a program. And then when you talk about the Novogratz, the Kerry McCoys, and everyone else that's been supportive of this program, and they've has a little bit of a Hollywood twist to it when you have some of the other people that are supporting those programs, and some people that have been around Morgan State for many years. And so it's exciting. And I look forward to it getting up and running and really having an impact in the wrestling world.
Sean will probably be mad at me that we didn't talk about Michigan for 45 minutes, but I think we covered a lot of really cool areas, and we just have a couple minutes left. But like I said at the beginning, KJ, I have a ton of respect for you. You're a winner. There's that winners win kind of thing. So I know wherever you go, there's going to be success. The kids at USA Wrestling have been really blessed, and the young men at Michigan and probably young women in the RTC will continue to be blessed by your presence. I would wish you luck, but you don't need it. But I'll say good luck as you're my friend. I know at the very latest, I'll see you in Detroit in March.
Right on.
So,
well, I appreciate you, and you know how I feel about you and your family, and our history goes back a long ways. And so I appreciate what you do for wrestling, and keep doing your thing.
I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kevin Jackson. I'm David Mirikitani. We'll speak to y'all next week.